All right, welcome back to Fellowship. So, Matt is gone today. He's off hunting turkeys. So, gobble gobble. We'll hear about those a little bit later. I'm sure next week he'll be telling us all the stories about his failed hunting. I'm presuming he failed. I think justifiably so, because I haven't heard anything about a turkey. So, one must assume. But at the same time, I'm not here alone, so you guys can be thankful for that. So you don't have to deal with a lot of Andrew time. I have so interesting news break. As we were recording right now, my guest and I talking about Matt's probably failed turkey hunt. I hear my neighbor yelling my name, so my guest and I go out and go look, and funny enough, there is a turkey in my neighbor's yard right now. So, pretty interesting. Definitely going to rub that in Matt's face, but either way, we'll hit the music here and we will get started.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right. Well, we're back here, and I have a very special guest today. I have Brother Dave Vargas. You guys might remember him from an episode with Matt a couple of months ago. How long ago was that, Dave? September. He had a brief cameo, and now we've brought him back for a full episode. So, Dave, can you please introduce yourself and what lodges you're a part of and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. My name is David Vargas. I am a brother of Wautoma Lodge 148, as well as a recent plural member of Lake 189.
Congratulations. I got to vote on... Well, actually, I got to lead that ballot. Yeah.
Yes, you did.
So the classic question we like to start with is what brought you to Freemasonry and what keeps you in Freemasonry?
Well, I believe I shared it before, so I'll share it again. I was initially interested in Freemasonry probably in the early 2000s. And it was when I was working in Wautoma. My employer was immediately across the street from the lodge.
Oh, really?
Right. And
was that Dairy Queen?
It was not Dairy Queen. It was the government building. So one day I saw my previous Cub master, because from the Cub Scouts from way back when, he was parked out front, which that's where we tend to park. And I asked him about Masonry. And he didn't really give me a lot of answers, kind of left it open. So I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and went on about my life. Probably initially what got me into Masonry, I would say that, as with many, just hearing about the Brotherhood, the fraternity, hearing about the mysteries through probably the media,
yeah, right.
Films. And so it just kind of sat back there. Eventually, in 2019, I was taking my best friend, Victor Magnus, to actually deploy. He was heading out for the military, and we began talking about what was his final hours like before leaving. And one of the highlights was he had posted his Master Mason examination.
Oh,
and so as we continued to talk, and of course COVID times, it just grew my interest throughout 2020, and by end of year 2020, I had placed a petition with Wautoma Lodge.
So we were talking in the last episode. You were in a college fraternity as well. You're still kind of semi-active in that, right, as an alumni? How would you describe did that play any effect into you wanting to join Freemasonry and find like an adult fraternity? And how would you compare and contrast them?
Oh, that's such a loaded question. No, I agree. And yes, I was in a college fraternity. And I would say that for my entire life, I was always joining different things. Whether it was in high school, I was on the football team, I was in various clubs, I was very heavily involved in theater and music. And then moving on to college, same thing. I wanted to find maybe something more than myself. In high school, I was also involved in the Boy Scouts. Well, I should say well before high school, but even throughout high school. And I enjoyed that spirit, that camaraderie. So the college fraternity, I think it has its place. It's meant to keep you a bit more grounded amidst the woes and ways of college life. And I appreciated that brotherhood. Several of my best friends are college fraternity brothers, and I still am very close with them. I'm flying out at the end of the month to visit one of them out in Virginia, and just saw another one a few weeks ago. He lives in northern Wisconsin. So the college fraternities, they have the symbolism, they have the structure, they have the social aspect, and where they maybe, of course, we had some education, but that's where with the Masonic fraternity, I think there's a lot more when it comes to this is a choice that we're making and that we're deliberately going out of our way to be amongst brothers and to improve not only the community but ourselves.
So I've known a handful of brothers who were in college fraternities. I also had a bunch of friends who were in the Acacia fraternity, which was originally a Masonic-ish off-breed, or I don't know if that's the right word, and they had similar things to say where it sounded like they had ritual, but the surface was harder to scratch because there wasn't as much time to really unpack the meaning, and it seems like it was more like it realized the value of having a philosophy, but it didn't have the time to necessarily pack it in. And the disservice is that since they're in the fraternity for 4 to, I guess plus, depending on some people. I've seen Animal House. It could be 20 years, I guess, right? But, that it doesn't have as much education opportunity, but it utilizes a similar system. How would you compare, without giving details, of course, your college fraternity's ritual to Masonic ritual as far as content?
So what's interesting for me with college, I actually belonged to two, I guess, social groups. One was a social independent, which was basically a fraternity but did not have any Greek affiliation. That was for my first 2 years. I joined them because of actually my sister. We went to the same college. She's a couple of years older. These were a lot of her friends. And so I found that sense of belonging within that group for my first few years. But as I got to know others, just people that I worked with, people that I went to class with, I wanted more. And I will say that social independent group was probably more geared in the line of an Animal House type of circumstance. So there was a lot more partying. With that being said, moving into a Greek fraternity, that there immediately was that notion, this is going to be more meaningful. Just the way that you hold yourself, the way that you have different roles with officers, right? As well as then the ritual. And I think I was only in there for 2 years, and I was the sergeant at arms. And so it was my responsibility similar to a deacon, which is making sure that the environment is set up correctly, that everyone who's there should be there. And from there, it was really focused on saying, how do we make ourselves a little bit better? But again, as you said, how much time do we actually have to devote when amongst relationships and classes and everything else, we also want to have a social life.
And have fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I was never, what do they call it? GDIs? What does a GDI mean? You ever heard that? I think it's a goddamn independent, which is all my buddies who are in college fraternities would use to say the uninitiated in a sillier way. But as a GDI, I always found it interesting in the way that you stereotype Greek fraternities, and some deserve it and some do not, is what I learned. So I would go to the Acacia fraternity in Madison, and I would say it in the most respectful and honestly most flattery possible. That was more of a nerdy fraternity. So they still did fun stuff, and they would party sometimes. But for the most part, they were just a bunch of guys who were buckling down and getting to work and doing well at their grades. And yeah, their house was disgusting in some places, sure. But what house full of 10 guys isn't? And so not every college fraternity is built the same, which is interesting. And so I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole because I just decided to do that. Would you say that there were similar lessons taught between your fraternity and Masonry?
I would say so. When we think about the ritual aspect, as well as just giving you that insight as to an obligation. What do you swear to? What do you agree to? That's the starting point. From there, then it develops into what you would like it to develop in. Some guys, they don't take any role in the officer line. That's about as far as it goes. We ask everyone to attend a retreat. We ask everyone to participate in the education process, perhaps have a little brother that you're mentoring, but that's not a requirement. I was fortunate even in the span of a year to have two, and that was I was really grateful for both, and I still maintain connections with both of them.
That's awesome. It's interesting because, for a long time in American history, fraternalism was very important to men. Having a group that, when you look at, comparing Greek fraternities were 100% based off of Freemasonry. As were a lot of groups. They looked at the format and said, I like what's here, but I want to do something different with it. What I always found very interesting with it is the power of giving young men not only a blueprint or a design on their trestle board, as we would say in Masonry, but also the actual decision-making power to self-govern with positions that require authority. Look at De Molay as a great example, or Job's Daughters, or whatever youth group. The fact that you can put a young person in a position of authority and be like, hey, this is our mission. This is your responsibilities. How transformative that can be as a process. And even though Masons are older, I think the same thing applies. Like the same benefits that apply to younger people apply to older people, because even in Freemasonry, some people have never been put in that position where they're actually given that their voice matters. I remember when I was probably 2 or 3 years ago, I was trying to explain to Claire like why I liked Freemasonry so much. And it almost came out the way I said it in an emotional moment is, it's very few places that my voice matters. In my profession, kind of, but not really, and that you're as close to the mission, and that what you do and say has a direct impact on your little weird group that you get to have some say in, and over time, potentially more say in. But as you learn and stuff, there's something very transformative about being given the ability to recognize your voice matters and that you have good ideas. And I think what's interesting with all these groups is like with some of my young mentee babies, when they have taken officers' positions, or even if they haven't, if they step up and do something, how much that like bolsters not only their confidence, but also like transforms them into a person who's like, I want to do stuff because what I say does matter.
At a foundational level, a fundamental level, when we talk about, well, things that we share, or perhaps we shouldn't share, crypt science words. And they had that same in a Greek fraternity. But even before that, I've had great conversations with Worshipful Brother Dave Reed, and he was also a member of the scouting movement. And we talked about how there's a honor society within Scouts where, again, there is a specific word that's what you are granted. Now, there is some exclusivity there, but or maybe I should reframe that too. There's some ownership that you are expected to maintain, that for which only others who have been rightly initiated have that knowledge. So you own that, and you have to decide how meaningful is that to you. Do you want to that, or do you want to share that? And that leads to integrity. And so I think those lessons right there are the building blocks, because then as you are able to have the benefit of either being elected or appointed into a role, now you have the decision on, well, what are you going to make of that?
Sure. The Scouts, is that the Order of the something arrow? What's that called? The
Order of the Arrow.
Order of the Arrow, where this interesting thing where so many people are like concerned, like, what are the secrets of Masonry? What are the secrets of Masonry? And throughout history, those secrets have been, depending on jurisdiction, less and less secretive, but they've always maintained some secrets. And I try to explain to people, I go, truly, the things that I'm not allowed to tell you about are the most trivial of all the information I can tell you about. And it's hard for me to necessarily explain to the GDIs that the point of the secrets is to test someone's integrity. And I think it's an awesome drill to say, if you can pick one thing, as arbitrary as it may seem, and it doesn't actually matter, and yes, you can Google it, like it's not on me, you're just not going to hear it from me. If you can maintain that, maybe you can start to build from there. And I think that is kind of like very subtly powerful. I think it can really like start to set it up, like when someone tells you something and they're like, hey, I really would appreciate you not, and you don't, it just builds, because you're like, if I can hold one secret, I can hold another secret. And it's this little sneaky maneuver that Masonry put in, like, hey, this is a good skill. An honorable man knows how to be faithful to his word. And like you were mentioning, with any obligation, it's up to the individual how seriously they take it. And, we've been plagued since the first days of Masonry with people who have not taken it seriously, but that reflects less on the fraternity and more on the individual's unworthiness. And you just go, yeah, you will not be trusted for your word. You will not be trusted for your heart. You may not even be trusted for anything that comes out of your mouth, which just basically means, are you a man of honor or are you not a man of honor? And, being a man of honor used to mean a lot. It used to mean a lot to everybody because they didn't have contracts. They just said, well, if you're known as honorless, no one will make a deal with you. And we kind of lost that in the modern era. But it's nice to have fraternity that puts the emphasis on the importance of that? Because I don't think it's ever really lost its value.
Trust, dignity, and respect. And certainly from my background working with individuals who may have had to be adjudicated to spend some time inside a local lockup, that, they don't have much in there. However, they do have dignity and respect. And trust will be earned, but dignity and respect are foundational. And so it always comes back down to communication and the relationship.
And for our listeners, they don't think that Dave has spent time in prison. He's also a police officer, so he also...
I have spent a lot of time, but I oftentimes got out after 12 or 16 hours.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned from that type of stuff. Shifting gears a little bit, Masonic travel. For our listeners, Brother Dave is a pretty well-known traveler in our area. He's been a lot of places, not only around the state, around other states, and internationally. Can you tell us a little bit of a story about when you've been traveling internationally? Because I know you have them in your back pocket.
I do. I keep them back there. It's been over a year now, so maybe I can start letting them out a little bit. I would say that, first of all, I really started traveling. I'll go back to 2022. So basically my second year as being a Mason. And I was traveling in Nova Scotia, one of my favorite spots, Atlantic, Canada. Shout out to them.
I want to go to Nova Scotia so bad.
Highly recommend. Get out there. It's an amazing place. And so I was out there. I always tried to bank a little bit of time, and it was my second time out there. And it was kind of a dreary night in Halifax. I didn't wander too far from the hotel.
But you weren't a broken man on a Halifax pier, were you?
I was not.
Okay.
And yes, I survived the Great Halifax Explosion, too.
So you weren't the last man of Halifax's privateer, so that's good.
That's correct. So I decided to just go to the restaurant that was right up the hill from my hotel. And I got in there, and I always like to kind of jot some notes down because they have the most phenomenal seafood chowder. And as I'm leaving, I decided I'm going to take a selfie outside with the restaurant's sign. And as I take the selfie, I'm looking at it, and here it is. There's a plaque on the side of the building, and it was the Grand Lodge of Nova Scotia upstairs, or at least the original building.
Sure.
They had since moved. And that it kind of irked me from that point forward, saying, you know what, I had a great opportunity to do some traveling internationally, and I didn't take advantage of it. So I thought about that. Well, recently, last year, I had the opportunity to travel down to South America, to Peru. That's where my dad's family's from. And the sole focus was, we're going to go and see our family, and we are going to go and really just see the sights of, well, one of the things that I wanted to do was just at least visit the Grand Lodge, and it was only a couple miles from where we were staying, the Airbnb. So we got there, we actually got a nice tour through the museum, and brothers started showing up. Well, we're going to head back. We're sitting out on the front steps, and older gentleman comes up, and he says, we have plenty of seats inside. Please come out inside. And we just said, well, we're just waiting on our Uber. A few minutes later, he comes back out with a few other brothers, and it turns out to be the Grand Master of Masons in Peru. And then he said, well, if you were properly clothed, we'd invite you in for the meeting. So my recommendation to all brothers is always bring a black suit.
Just in case.
Just in case. You never know. I'm heading out to Virginia. I'm really thinking, even though I'm there 4 days, and I've been to the lodges around that area where my friend is, I'm really still thinking I should just still pack that suit just in case.
Just in case a day opens up and you get an inkling to just reach out. So with your travels around the United States, what would you say is one of your most memorable traveling experiences outside of the Grand Master of Peru trying to invite you into their meeting?
Right. I would say that the first travel that I did outside, and I know that there's a process, so our most worshipful past Grand Master, Mike, please forgive me for not following that process. But I travel for work occasionally, and I was in Columbus, Ohio. I was chatting with Victor, and he said, you should go find a lodge. I said, all right. Well, I go and find the local lodge closest to where I was doing the training, and it turns out that they had their meeting the night before. Oh man, missed it again. But then I went to the Grand Lodge of Ohio's website and started looking around Columbus area. There was probably no less than 8 lodges that were meeting that night. I just had my pick. I chose the closest one, and that turned out to be the home lodge, the mother lodge of President James Garfield.
Oh, that's cool.
And so since he was also a general in the Civil War, I'm a big Civil War guy. And so that there was just a lot of meaningfulness there. The other one would be, I love going to lodges in Virginia. It's so neat to meet brothers and re-meet them, because I've gone to several lodges twice. So it's just a neat experience. I think anytime you're able to travel outside of your jurisdiction, please make sure you maybe go through the process, but also, no matter what, give at least a heads up. The other most meaningful one that I must say is going to be Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a unique jurisdiction because, as our nation's capital, they have multiple lodges with different language and perhaps different rites as far as their ritual. And I chose to stop by Georgetown Lodge, or Potomac Lodge number 5, which is in Georgetown. And that night, this was this past November, I showed up. It was a nondescript storefront. But then I rang the buzzer. I was allowed in. Oh, welcome! And you picked a great night because it's our Thanksgiving feast. There was turkey. There was all the fixings right there, and so I enjoyed that. And you also, by the way, this is also a great night because we're raising 6 Master Masons.
Oh my God. Good thing you're going to stay late tonight.
It's a good thing that I was co-facilitating my training, because I forced myself to stay, and I was one of the last 5 people, and it was amazing.
What time did you get out?
I arrived shortly before 7, and I didn't leave until 1:30, and had to drive back to Baltimore.
Good news for you. We're going to be here till 1 a.m.
Right. But how could you not? If you are presented with that opportunity, how could you not take advantage of that?
Because I would.
That's amazing. You just don't have opportunities like that just happen.
Well, what's interesting with that is your travel's kind of pointing out like that one of the cool things in Masonry is you have the ability to be a traveling man, which means there's opportunities that will just open up, and you just have to be willing to go along for the ride, which might mean you're leaving at 1 a.m. after watching 6 people raised. So you're like, I really would like to get to know this jurisdiction ritual. Like, do you want to see it more than once? And you're like, I guess so.
It was an amazing experience. I wish I could have taken notes. I'm not sure if that would have been acceptable or not, but regardless, just to experience that, to share that with the brothers, or more so for them to share that with me, I think it's an experience that you just can't replicate. And I would advocate, you just mentioned, we are, as Masons, we are known as traveling men, or you can be the traveling man. What does that really mean? You decide what it means. Maybe for you, it's going to be, I'm going to travel just to a lodge within my district, and that's great. Do that. But if you are able to, go outside of your district, and then go outside of your jurisdiction and forge those bonds, build those connections, because that's really what it's all about.
I always have this funny thing that I say that every lodge that I've visited, I get possessive over, where I go, those are my boys now. It takes one visit and you're like, those are my guys. Those are my guys. And I haven't been able to travel extensively. Well, 1, not nearly as close as you. 2, not nearly as close as Matt. I try to make time to travel. It's become harder since I've had a kid. But where I've always struggled is when I go outside of state. I have to know how many days it is. If I'm going to tell my wife that one of those days I want to spend is at a lodge, there needs to be enough day buffer to give me an excuse. So I'm strategic. But every time I've been outside of state where I've had, let's say it's a week, and I go, no one likes midweek. It's lame. I'll find a lodge to go to. I can never get them to respond. And I have been corrected by worshipful brother Jeff that I should have reached out to most worshipful brother Mike DeWolf. And if he's listening, because I know sometimes he does, I'm sorry. I should have.
Shame on you.
And next time I shall.
Yes.
100%. When I was in Florida, I had reached out to a lodge that was 25 minutes away. It was in St. Andrews, which is a small suburb outside of Panama City. And I'd reached out to them and I said, hey, I'm going to be in the area. Just trying to see if you guys are meeting. I know it says you might be, but just checking in to see if that's possible. They reached out to me day of that meeting, so I didn't hear from them, so I didn't plan it in. I was in the middle of cooking jambalaya for my family. And they texted me and said, oh my God, I don't check my social media very often. You're more than welcome to come by. We'd love to see you. And I was like, I'm in the middle of cooking jambalaya, lads. Like, I wish I could. But so the next day, we went there and I was doing, so we didn't have anything on the agenda. So for my family, I do this thing where I will look up pre-scripted tour guide routes, and I'll be the tour guide. So it's a self-guided tour, and I'll be the tour guide. And so I took them around St. Andrews, showing them various things, printing press that I went into, and they showed me that the founder of Panama City owned the printing press, and we got to use a printing press to print stuff for ourselves.
Nice.
And I bought a bunch of printed press stuff. Very cool place. And as I'm walking, and it was so windy that it was miserable. But I'm trying to be a good tour guide, right? Put on a strong face to some miserable family members. And I look to my left and they go, is this why this tour is going on? And there's the lodge sitting there and it's this old building and all this stuff. And I took a picture in front of it and I was like, no, but I'm happy I saw it at least because I really want to travel outside of the district. Outside of the state because, I mean, making friends in different states, that's something that's really, really special in Freemasonry. No one else gets to do that. Not easily, at least. They have to have a good reason for it.
It can be intimidating, and that's probably one of the reasons why. That's probably one of the reasons why not many people will travel outside the state. And I generally recommend that if you have any desire, I mean, if you're going somewhere, take a moment to just do a simple Google search. You can use apps like the Amity app.
And reach out to the Grand Secretary.
And yes, absolutely. First, reach out to the Grand Secretary in your planning phase, well before you leave the state, right? But I mean, the things that you can do, and I think that's something that's also intimidating because the organization that I work for we have employees all over North America, internationally as well. And I remember as recent as this past holiday season, that I always meet my colleagues. Some of them are newer. I haven't met them before. Well, you always learn things about them. And I learned that I knew I had at least one brother, but I have three brothers who are part of Freemasonry and in different jurisdictions, Texas, North Carolina, as well as Georgia. And it's just having that bond. All of a sudden, everything changes. You know, they're not just a colleague anymore. This is someone.
They're a brother.
They are a brother, someone you can trust and respect. And so I advocated to them when you have the ability to, because you all travel way more than I do. I still go out from time to time, but they're on the road pretty consistently. And so, I mean, if you're able to bring that suit along, make sure that you look up where you're going to and just reach out and be willing to, I mean, there's going to be some testing, right? There's going to be some testing that you're going to go through. Don't be afraid of that. There is a reason why we have you post. There is a reason why that you maybe, have that knowledge on the back of your hand. It's nothing that you haven't seen before. You're not going to.
And it sounds like that when you're tested, even if you get it wrong, they can tell if you're a Mason. Like, you know what I mean? They'll be like, oh, he just doesn't know all the trivia. But like you can pretty quickly, through a couple of questions, sniff out a Mason from a not one. You can go, oh, you just don't really care about this stuff as much as other Masons, but I can sniff it out on, like, it's pretty easy to tell after a couple of probing questions. You're like, yeah, I know you're a Mason. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and just like when we recently had our brothers visiting from, what was it, Mississippi?
Louisiana.
Excuse me. No disrespect. That I mean, that's where you are going to be asked certain questions, but those are the questions that Masons know. And if necessary, I mean, I'll also bring your dues card along, of course, but really try to be prepared for that. Don't be intimidated by that, because I think the dividends is going to vastly outweigh just those moments of maybe uncertainty that you might have.
I just think that there's no jurisdiction I could go to, regardless of testing, that they would not figure out that I was a Mason one way or another, right?
Right.
Like, they might be like, that was a hard question, but what about this? And they're like, okay, no one else would know that, right? You know what I mean? Like, and I've never heard of a brother who's been tested, and I'm sure none of them passed with flying colors on everything, where they were denied admission because they weren't able to adequately show that they were Masons. Because I think that Masons are pretty good at sniffing it out. I do think we do. I've definitely had people reach out online and very quickly, or actually, here's a good example. So I was in the public and I saw, when I was even a fellow craft, saw a guy wearing a Masonic hat, and I approached him. I said, whoa, are you? And I didn't know how to use slick lines. I said, are you a Mason? He's like, yeah, I am. And the way he started answering questions, I immediately started going, beep, beep, beep. And I go, I don't think this guy is. So I go, what lodge are you a part of? It was a clandestine lodge. And you can, any Mason who's been around long enough can very quickly start to tell a level of experience. And yes, you should be checking, and a dues card is probably one of the most important things to check. But you can very quickly start to, in a very fast conversation, start to go, I'm not so sure about this. Like, really, it doesn't take rocket science. Like, there's also, like, what's interesting is I've listened to podcasts before with random guys, and they'll use certain words when they're talking about something, and I go, that guy Mason? Like, and it's just because they choose words that people don't really use, but we use in Masonry a lot.
Right.
And then I'll Google it, and I go, yep, he is. And I go, just the way Masons talk, you can kind of tell.
If you just imagine the amount of time that we spend to become proficient and memorize our ritual, I mean, there's some transference. You're going to start using certain words or incorporating those words into your
Inculcated. Inculcated is a
lexicon,
big one.
right?
It's like, and I thought this was inculcated in this, and I go, you said inculcated? I sniff it on you. I'm not check that.
That's right. Well, and you know, that's interesting, and such an enlightening episode last year when you interviewed worshipful brother Paul Larson, who I've known for well over 20 years. We worked together many years ago, and it was great that Masonry. I mean, we've always, I guess, stayed in contact through social, but that we came back together, reunited
at last, and it feels so good.
It feels so good. Shout out to Brother Paul.
Yep.
Have to come visit. And so, you know, just hearing his story, and you're right, like, but in that case, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yep.
It wasn't until later on. And so, I mean, there always is going to be that degree of skepticism, perhaps. I mean, but that's a responsibility that we do have.
A necessary degree of skepticism, yep.
Mm-hmm. And it's no disrespect. It's just that's where traveling to different lodges. Some lodges, they will offer some sort of testing. Some will accept your credentials. Some there will be none at all. But it's also a matter of how you carry yourself, and I'm sure they could probably tell even in just the interactions, the questions that you might ask, in whether it's through fellowship or, I mean, whether at any point they could probably have some inkling. And if they had any doubt, they have the tools available. We have the tools available to ensure that we are making sure that our lodge is protected.
It's funny because, like, what is a better reason to make sure that you're up on snuff? If you are going to travel, every Mason should have a level of competency with not only our symbols, our allegories, and the various things, because you never know when someone's going to doubt that you're a Mason, and any Mason should be able to back that up. And to our listeners, if you feel like you're scared that you couldn't back that up, I hope that this is a friendly and brotherly whispering of wise counsel. Like, it doesn't take much. It takes not a lot of effort to make sure you're competent. To excel, yes, it takes a lot of time. But to get that minimum competency, it just means to pay attention and just to care. And so if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I could pass that, study your ritual, look at our stuff, just put a little more effort in. I mean, you really should not be hard to convince when you're a Mason if you are a Mason. And
if you haven't been to lodge in a while, that's okay. I mean, as you described, I mean, you have to adjust your trestle board just a bit, or your 24-inch gauge. You have priorities. Maybe it's going to be family, and maybe it's going to be work. But you have the tools available, and if you don't have the tools, you have the brethren that you can turn to. And they will help you out. Just a few weeks ago up in Wautoma, we had our rusty nail degree. And that was such a great experience to have 5 or 6 brothers who came to participate in that from various lodges. And just saying, you know what, recognizing, you know, we're always chipping away at that ashlar. And maybe I haven't chipped away at it in a while. So what can I do to hone that up?
And if you've been away from lodge for too long, I think there's some fear that your brothers will be mad at you or whatever you could conceive in your mind. We've had brothers who have come back after a long time away, and mostly we're just like, oh, dang, heck yeah. All right, yeah, we'll give you, I've done impromptu rusty nails where I just go, before you go in, let's just run through some things, just so you can start to get your feet back on the ground. No one's mad if life circumstances dragged you away, or who knows, who cares, to be honest. If you're back, your brothers are still your brothers. At the core level, they're your brothers, regardless of your knowledge, regardless of how long you've been away. They are ready and willing to help you get your feet back under you, back into lodge. And so don't be afraid to come back to lodge if you've been away for too long. You know, I always talk about how stated communication is important because it is the way you resynchronize with the craft and your brothers. Make it to stated, come on out, and just, get back into the swing of things.
Yeah, and when you have that opportunity even then to attend degrees, I mean, every single time you attend a degree, some degree work, no matter what jurisdiction you're in, you're going to take something away saying, wow, that's similar, that's unique. But I appreciate just having this opportunity to learn a little bit more. And so, you are a brother, even if it's been a long time. We just appreciate you being there. There's one guy I'm still working on that I see him every now and then, and he just says, keep on sending me those texts.
He's like, the time will come.
Yep. And I will do that. I will gladly do that because I know how much. I mean, the person, he was inspired, right? At one point, he's had different life circumstances. That's okay. We all do. Mm-hmm. But that we still want the best for you. And he still continues. I mean, we have some brothers who, unfortunately we've had to kind of suspend them because of non-payment. But I know that this particular brother, he will always, at some point throughout the year.
Which means he hasn't given up.
That's right.
He's just not ready yet.
Right.
I think that's a good place to start wrapping up on. It's my understanding you have some promos you'd like to do as the Wautoma Lodge's best promoter. So I'd ask that you whip those puppies out.
Well, I couldn't turn down a shameless plug. I actually think it's a form of being a good steward, a good ambassador of Wautoma Lodge, which is located smack dab in the central of Wisconsin. We're about maybe a half hour or more from the nearest lodges to us. But we, of course, we one thing I keep on hearing, Wautoma does good work. We have a strong following. And so we have a few fundraisers coming up, and the one that is coming up the most, or I guess the soonest, will be our annual Wautoma Father's Day car show. And this is a car show that has been going on for many years. I believe we're over 20 years now, I don't want to say.
Sounds right. I made your guys' logo, so I got very familiar with the event.
You're well aware of it. But we are very happy. So a few years ago, we had hosted it at a local park, and last year we had to transfer from that small park because we were busting at the seams. We had enough space for show cars, but we didn't have enough space for parking, which made maybe some city officials upset because we started parking in the outfield of some softball diamonds. But now we moved to the fairgrounds, so come visit us. We're if you're able to, the Washington County Fairgrounds. It's going to be taking on Father's Day this year, and we have plenty of opportunity for you. We're expecting at least, I'm hoping, for 100 to 180 cars, trucks, motorcycles. We're really hoping for some great weather because last year we were rained out just a bit in the morning, but we still had over 1,100 spectators. We have added some dyno testing for $70 to test or see your torque and horsepower. We also have a bourbon pull for $70, and this is one where you play, you win. The bourbon bottles that have been donated range anywhere from $35 to $175 of bourbon, rye, and whiskey. There's 32 bottles in total. We have 6 food vendors who will also be available throughout the day. We have a gun raffle that we are utilizing for further fundraising. So if you're interested, come see me. I've been pedaling all over southeast Wisconsin. And then we also will have a 50-50 raffle as well as a bag raffle on the day of, which includes some Brewers tickets. So for those of you Major League Baseball fans, these could be yours. We'll have dung take with local folks that all monies are raised will be managed for or will be applied towards scholarships locally. And so we're asking for a $1 donation for spectators at the door, and these will go on to fund a local donation, whether it be our K-9 unit for our sheriff's office or emergency equipment like bleed kits for our schools. And so we will have a DJ going. So if you're interested, again, please visit the Washington County Fairgrounds on Father's Day this year. We also have an additional raffle that we are starting to promote. This is going to be for our scholarship fund, and this will include looks like it is a Whistle Pig Boss Hog 8 that is going to be available for you. It's $50 a ticket. Must be 21 years of age to enter. The drawing will be at the Wautoma Lodge 148 on August 25th and 7 p.m. The winner does not need to be present to win. We are asking for a donation of $50 per ticket, and only 100 tickets will be printed. So,
So if people are trying to find more information and they cannot find you physically, where's the best way to get more info?
Going to be on our Facebook page. We do have our Wautoma Lodge 148 Wautoma Freemasons Facebook page, as well as we do have a car show website.
I'll put it in the show notes.
That's correct.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dave, so much for coming and joining me for a one-on-one podcast. I always love hanging out with you. I mean, we see each other plenty, but I'm happy you came on down. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Just as a heads up, we have slightly rebranded. We are now the Time for Fellowship Masonic podcast. We did this for Google purposes, but it's still with me and Matt, and we're doing our thing. If you would like to follow us on social media, please do. Give us a like, give us a share. It goes a long way. And if you would like to join us on Discord to get some behind-the-scenes stuff, such as a picture of a turkey, you can find us there. The link is in the show notes. Either way, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.